I can see, oh, I'm spiraling. Hello, beautiful soul family. Britt Cannon here, host of the Walk On podcast, the podcast where I try to demystify spirituality, personal growth and healing, and whatever else I feel like talking about. This week's episode is called How to Stop Self-Sabotaging. And in it, I talk about where self-sabotage comes from, like where the impulse to self-sabotage starts. I happen to think in my own experience, in my healing my own patterns, that it comes from childhood, just like everything else, just like every other trauma-fueled impulse. How when we are told that we're unworthy, when we get the message when we're really young that like we're unworthy of love because the people who are supposed to love us unconditionally don't, that we're unworthy of good things to happen to us because they so rarely do. When we're disappointed over and over and over again, when we're made to feel like a disappointment over and over and over again, simply because our parents didn't love us for who we were. They loved us for their version of us, for the us that we were supposed to become because that's what they had in mind. You never live up to those expectations because inevitably you're gonna turn out different, like we are individuals, like we're born with our own mind, our own perceptions, our own interests, our own skills and talents, our own capacities for certain things. And when you get the message that you're disappointing, it sets you up for a lifetime of grappling with imposter syndrome and a lack of self-confidence. It makes you feel like you're not worthy of good things happening to you. It makes you even afraid when good things happen to you, that you almost like this, there's this like anxiety response to good things that like, okay, how am I going to have to pay for this in the long run? Like what bad is going to happen to me to counteract this good that's happening to me? It can be really hard to let good things in, and it can be really hard to admit what we actually want, what we actually desire. I talk about this in regards to, because I really like to bundle my episodes. So I like to do 3 or 4 in a row that kind of like surround and cover the same topic on a month-by-month basis. Although it doesn't always work out that way, but lately that's been how it's going because I just kind of like ruminate on a topic from all sides for like a whole month at a time. And so that's how it ends up playing out in the episodes. So we talked about fake friends 2 weeks ago, unrequited love last week, and now this week we're talking about self-sabotage. So how do those unreciprocal relationships factor into self-sabotage? Well, if you look at just, on a totally like universal level, what are we looking for? We're looking for community. We're looking for partnership. We're looking for safety and security and stability. We're looking to be loved. We're looking to love openly and vulnerably without limits. We're looking to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to like be accepted and loved for who we are. We want to show up real, and we want the people in our lives to show up real as well. We want what we give to get back. We don't want to be in these relationships where we're constantly like having to think about them and consider them, and as far as like, does this person like me? How do they feel about me? Being in a state of like stress like that isn't ideal for relationships. That's not what we're all looking for. But we are kind of like taught to ignore what we want. Like even the sheer necessity of existing in capitalism sort of requires of us to put our own wants and needs on the back burner in favor of serving the ruling class through work. You know what I mean? So we aren't taught to consider what we want. I mean, in childhood, our wants and needs are so often pushed to the side for either our parents, like survival, like as far as their own needing to work, like we don't spend time together, we don't eat dinner as families anymore, we don't really know each other. We're just strangers in the same house. We're all staring at our screens. We're not connecting. And I'm saying that without judgment. It's just like the way it is. And, it's like, if your kid doesn't want to go grocery shopping with you, you just have to like bring them along. You can't really consider if they want to go or not. And so this like level of stress just being stretched so thin, no blame on the parents. We're all just trying to do our best. We're all just trying to survive, but it's just the reality of the situation that we don't have a lot to give. We can't really consider everyone's wants and needs all the time. And so when you're a little kid, you get that message that like what you want doesn't matter, what you need doesn't matter. And if you grow up in abusive households, that's taken to an even further extreme. And so as we grow, it's depending on your overlapping Venn diagrams of oppression that you experience, depending on your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, you may internalize that message differently. Some people become intensely selfish and just like run through the world taking what they want, fuck consequences, fuck people's feelings or whatever. And some people get debilitated by caring about others and putting themselves last. Some people really identify with that and feel like it makes them a better person for being able to do that, when really all it is codependence and a lack of boundaries. And I've definitely suffered from that. I talk a lot about my podcast. I talk a lot about this in my podcast, how in my life I found myself often waiting for someone to catch up with me, waiting for someone to heal enough, waiting for someone to want what I want, waiting for someone to show up the way I want or need them to, and then being disappointed and being really heartbroken when I had to move on from them, when I finally realized, like, why am I waiting? Like, if we don't want the same thing, then maybe we should go our separate ways. But how I felt like waiting for them was what I was supposed to do. I felt like I couldn't do what I wanted to do until those people came with me because of a fear of being alone, because of just like thinking I knew what was best for everyone, for thinking people needed to be on my timetable or I needed to be on someone else's. And all of that really was in resistance to what I actually wanted. And so we just get this idea in our head that what we want doesn't matter, that we should be disconnected from our wants and needs, our desires, from what would make us happy. I grew up with the strong messaging that like life wasn't fair, it wasn't supposed to be happy, it wasn't a vacation, and so I should just suck it up and get used to it. And the more awakened I've become, the more awareness I've been able to like cultivate and practice within myself, the more I've realized that life is happy. It can be happy. You can always find joy. You can always find fulfillment. And that the more you listen to your intuition and the more you honor what you want out of life, what you need out of life, the more you refuse to compromise as far as your integrity and your core values are concerned, the happier life is, the easier life is, the more effortlessly you flow from phase to phase of your life, the more peaceful and like smooth sailing everything is. Whereas before, when I was so in resistance, trying to either stuff down my wants and needs, and I would tell myself like, you're expecting too much, or what you want is impossible. I've had people tell me your standards are too high, just like all these things that sort of shame me for wanting better for myself, even from my family of origin, like, you think you're better than us, just that messaging my whole life because I was intellectual and because I wanted to go to college, because after I went to college, I was like, that didn't really do that much for me. I don't know, just this, even my politics, even being like a leftist, being anti-work, being like more communist minded, like resonating with anarchy in many different ways, and like communal living and just like an equitable existence. Even that rubs people the wrong way. And it's like how people look at vegans. I'm not a vegan. I hope to one day be, but it's tough to transition with like food when you have gone through eating disorders. Like, making things off limits is too fresh a wound for me. But I do think that vegans have it right. You know what I mean? Like, I do think that is like a goal to work towards. But people who just like go in and like kick the door down and demonize vegans for like, how dare you think you're better than us? Or like, how dare you think you have it figured out or whatever. It's like, that's just your ego, man. That's just your like, that's your own projection. And it would be better just to say like, I couldn't do it. I respect your choices, you know, like that's as far as it has to go. Anyway, I digress. When we consider what we want, when we allow ourselves to want what we want, things just get a lot easier and we can more clearly go after what we want. In the podcast, I talk about how we carry these, these weights of self-doubt, you know, of like unworthiness, of being a burden, of being too much, of being not enough. And so we have more we're dragging behind us as we try to reach our goals. So even if you know what you want and you think you're going after it, you feel like you're going after it, if you're burdened or weighed down by these limiting beliefs that were put in you in childhood, it takes a lot longer and it's a lot more strenuous of a process to get from here to there. You need to shed. And the best way to do that is by becoming aware, you know, looking back at our lives and looking back at our patterns and seeing how the self-sabotage plays out. You know, in what areas do I self-sabotage? If I'm in a happy, healthy, stable relationship, do I pick fights when things feel too peaceful? Or do I feel the need to like freak out because I'm afraid it's all going to fall apart because I finally have what I want? Or in my case, like with work, I have so many issues around like getting in trouble and not being perfect that at work, when I get just like even gently corrected, it sends me in an anxiety spiral that makes me want to curl into a ball and hide. But seeing that, becoming aware of that, taking that unconscious impulse that to self-sabotage, to run away, to quit when something is hard or when I'm not perfect at something, bringing it to light it doesn't stop it from happening necessarily, but it stops it from running away with me or me running away with it, right? I can see, oh, I'm spiraling. And I can just sit in the discomfort of that emotion and ride the wave of the fear, of the anxiety, of whatever is coming up memory-wise, as is the case with like any kind of PTSD. You know, you have emotional flashbacks, but inevitably there's always like a memory you can access that holds a little key to that wound, a little piece of that wound. And I really love to go back into those memories and give myself the comfort that I didn't receive in the moment. You know, if someone's berating me for not being perfect or for doing something wrong or for ruining everything or what have you, I go back and I tell my little self, like, it's okay. You know, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to get a bad grade. It's okay to, you know, get angry or get sad or, you know, it's not a big deal. Like, it happens all the time. It happens to everyone. And you know, we can just try again. We can just do better next time. And really, it's that fucking simple. That's how I would talk to a child that I was hanging out with, you know, like if whether through nannying or teaching or whatever, like that's how I instruct. That's how I model self-compassion to little ones. And so I go back and do it for my inner child, and it really helps. I know it sounds a little silly, but it really does help. And the more I can unlock those moments and those memories and sort of release my little self from that pain, the more free, the more unburdened I feel in the present moment. And acknowledging those patterns really helps me transcend them, and it helps me stop self-sabotaging, because it doesn't have to be the end of the world, you know, like getting a small correction or even getting like yelled at work or getting in trouble, like doing something that gets me a talking to or whatever. Nowadays, it'll still hurt, you know, it'll still freak me out. It'll still be really hard. But I don't have to like go all the way to the moon and back with my anxiety. Instead, I can just be like, damn, that's fucking triggering me. and just write it out, whether it's like a couple hours or a couple days, or if I need to just like sit on my yoga mat and meditate or go for a walk in the park or whatever, like I can get myself back to center. I don't have to totally blow up my whole life because I got triggered. And that is really like my self-sabotage really did used to go to those kinds of extremes. You know, one bad thing would happen in my life and I would feel the need to tank it all. I talk a little bit about in my podcast episode, the show Shameless, and how it is a really beautiful like art piece about trauma, about generational trauma and addiction and the trauma cycles that we repeat and play out. And also, it's an amazingly honest example of self-sabotage. Every single one of those characters has these incredible merits and like strengths, and at times really, really seems to get close to breaking out of the cycle, and then at the last minute will just tank it. And it's so disappointing and so frustrating to watch that it's almost unbearable, but it is also very honest. It happens to the best of us. And if we're not shown real healthy love, if we're not shown how to pursue your goals and dreams and desires, if we're not shown even how to consider what's healthy for us, what's good for us, if we're not shown boundaries, if we're not shown respect, then it's really hard to know that that exists, that that's available, and to put it into practice. It actually takes a lot of healing, a lot of work, a lot of self-awareness, a lot of courage, and a lot of commitment to pursue a goal, or to have a healthy relationship, or to be a parent in recovery, or to even like look at our trauma. And so if we're not there yet, self-sabotage is almost certainly present. It can be really frustrating. I know it can make us want to be really angry with ourselves and to be even meaner to ourselves. But I promise you, my friends, I promise you that no one healed ever through shame. Like, shame never helped anyone. Self-compassion is the way. Patience with ourselves is the way. And think gentler, think softer, think kinder, think more loving, think more patient. I cannot tell you enough how much picturing my inner child at my most vulnerable, at my most innocent, and talking to my inner self the way that I would that child helps me heal. I know it sounds silly. I know it sounds woo-woo as fuck, but it is so important. It really changes everything. You know, I talk a little bit about that mean voice and how a good measure of whether or not you have these like self-defeating thoughts or not, if you're not aware of them at all, is when you drop something. What is your response when you drop something? Nowadays, my response is like, fuck. You know, like I might be frustrated. I might hate the loud noise. I might break something and feel really bad about it. But 5 years ago, when I would drop something, it would be like, oh, you're such a fucking idiot. Oh, you're so fucking stupid. You're such a piece of shit. You don't do anything right. Just like spiral. And so if you want to know how to become aware of those kinds of thought patterns, pay attention when you drop something, how you talk to yourself. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself when you perceive yourself as messing up. And if you find yourself being really cruel to yourself, maybe stop, take a step back, take a deep breath, and reassess and think, does this really need, that's my door bell going off. Does this really need that kind of reaction? Is there a gentler way that I can approach this? Is there a way that I can practice forgiveness in this moment? And go with that instead. Go with the gentler way. Go with the kinder way. And think of yourself as a child. How would I speak to a child in this moment? And if you would speak to a child that harshly and that angrily, you have a lot more work to do. So with all that said, if you want to hear more about it, the link to the full episode is down below. I hope that this week you can practice becoming a little bit more aware of your patterns. I hope that you can maybe think a little bit about your past experience with self-sabotage. If you want to tell me about them, I would love to hear about them in the comments. If you have any tips for how you've overcome it, how you've changed your response to getting what you want, or letting yourself dream, letting yourself consider that there might be better out there, I'd love to hear from you. And I hope that you just can move in the direction of kindness and self-compassion and inner love, because it really does spill out in every direction, and it really does make flowing with the journey of life a lot easier. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. The link to everything is in the description below. I'll talk to you next time.